Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined as always by Scott Bogman and by Pat Fitzmaurice. Fellas, we were just talking about this on another show I was taping with Fitz. So Bogman, I'll kind of toss this to you. We're in August now. We are in draft season for, redraft managers. We are into just a month away. We can literally say next month we have week 1 NFL football. We have Red Zone. We have Scott Hansen. We have it all back in our lives so soon. How excited are you with the calendar flipping to August?
I am pumped. We have at the day we're recording this, the Hall of Fame game is happening. There's so much going on right now. A lot of news from camp, a lot of guys in the best shape of their life, a couple injuries happening, a lot of highlights, so this is the time we're getting excited. It's draft. It's officially draft season now that it's August. And we're moving downhill, and it's going to move real fast. And before you know it, football until February. It's my favorite time of year.
We actually, we just finished taping a show on the main feed with Debro, and he was giving me a hard time for kind of not rolling my eyes, but maybe poo-pooing a little bit how much of the Hall of Fame game I'm going to watch, which is going to be very little. I'm very excited because it's a milestone toward the season being back, but I'm not unlike Debro, I'm not betting fourth quarter props on these, sixth stringers who are going to be I'm never going to see them again after this game. That's not really me. Are you more along my side or along Debro's side of you're actually going to watch and pay close attention and enjoy the preseason, whether it's betting or trying to glean information from these games?
I mean, I'll watch all of it, but my attention level will dip and dive during it. So I'll probably see it a bunch because I'll just have NFL Network on a bunch this week, and it'll be the one thing they replay 16 times. So I'll probably know this game inside and out by the end of the week. But in terms of watching it live, I don't know. It's always I just can't watch all the used car salesmen in the fourth quarter go out there. It's tough. So.
And as I said on the other show, well before the fourth quarter for this game, halfway through the first quarter, it's going to be a whole lot of unrecognizable names. So, but football is to a degree back, which is ultimately a very, very good thing and a very, very exciting thing. Let's jump into today's show here on the Dynasty Pod. We're talking about 12 players who could make or break your season. These are some players that maybe you could consider trading if you wanted to. We're going to offer some cheaper alternatives to some of these players as well. But guys that here in 2024 could be real difference makers. Dynasty is a long-term game, but sometimes you're trying to win in the short term. Bogman, you are a short-term window type of a guy trying to win now and trying to win every year. Just a quick reminder for everybody, all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. You can navigate from there to our staff dynasty rankings on the site as well. Fitz, 12 make or break players for this season. Are you ready for this show?
I'm ready for this. And it is sort of a good reminder. I mean, we've been doing shows all off season and sort of looking at the long-term value of all these players. But, here we are, little over a month away from the start of the season. And this show might be a good reminder that probably, 70 to 75% of dynasty teams are seen by their managers as contenders heading into the season. Maybe 25 to 30% are rebuilding or retooling, but people want to win this year. And we're going to talk about guys and maybe narrow the focus a little bit and talk about what guys can do for you in 2024. And by the way, Worm, yeah, I know it's training camp season. I am not in the best shape of my life. In fact, I tweaked my foot walking my dog this morning. I had to go in the trainer's room about that. So I'm not in tip-top shape as we get into the heart of training camp.
You guys have heard all of my tales from the softball fields and know for ssure that I am not in the best shape of my life either. So I'm right with you there, Fitz. I think it's a good point, to what you're saying about, the type of show is that, unlike redraft, a lot of dynasty managers are very willing to trade. So if you are trying to win now, this is actually really valuable to kind of hone in on some of these players that can be win now guys and could make or break your 2024. Because if you agree with some of the players we throw out, if you like some of the cheaper alternatives, you are much more likely to get a trade done in dynasty than if you've done an early redraft already, or if you're remembering this episode a few weeks from now after your redraft. It's just going to be a lot easier to kind of, wheel and deal, so to speak, in Dynasty. So we're going to go through about a dozen names here. We're going to start with the running backs. And Fitz, we'll start with you. Which running back could make or break your season?
Tony Pollard. because, like everyone knew Tony Pollard to be a very good player in sort of a defined role with the Cowboys when Zeke was the lead guy, but Pollard was this change of pace, passing down back guy, very explosive. And people were really excited about him last year when he sort of ascended to a lead role. But unfortunately, it was the year after he had broken his foot in the playoffs. Maybe wasn't fully healthy at the start of the season and didn't get fully healthy till the end, but he just didn't carry over the great efficiency from earlier in his career to last year. So now a team change to the Titans. What we wonder about, though, I think, is how the division of labor works between Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears, especially when you've got Titans head coach Brian Callahan talking about Pollard and Spears being interchangeable, how either guy can play in early down situations, in passing down situations. He sees them as co-starters. So that's a little concerning, and it might lead to some erratic week to week production. And the other thing is, what if Will Levis doesn't work out for the Titans? What is this offense going to look like? It could just be a fantasy sinkhole.
Bogman, I'm curious what you think about Pollard. I have found myself generally this offseason a little higher than consensus on him. I like that theory. This is going to be a better offensive line in Tennessee. I like that he's another year removed from the injury. We've talked a lot about how in the back half of last season, he was saying that that's when he was finally healthy. And we've seen him in a shared backfield before be really efficient. So maybe if the volume isn't there, maybe that means he's not going to be a top 8 running back. But I still think it can be better than where he's currently being evaluated, both in redraft and in dynasty, quite frankly. So Pollard is somebody that I'm not extra aggressive on, but that I am in on. How do you feel about him this year?
Yeah, I mean, I was way more excited about Tony Pollard a week and a half ago before we heard Callahan come out and say, we're going to, all the buzzwords that you don't want to hear: hot hand, pace of game, situational, all of that stuff. Because the way I saw it with Tony Pollard coming into Tennessee was you have a new staff coming in. Tony Pollard was one of their first signings. So it's like, okay, you get the guys that you really want first to establish how you want to build this offense, right? They go out, they get Calvin Ridley, they get Tony Pollard. Seems like these two guys, and Tyjae Spears comes in from a, just a different staff. They're not necessarily beholden to what Tyjae Spears brings to this offense. So my thought process was Tony Pollard is going to be their guy. They spent the money on him. Teams don't spend money on running backs anymore. They bring him in. They obviously have a specific vision for him. Well, then we get to training camp and we hear split, hot hand, 50-50, all of this stuff. So it has sunk my enthusiasm on Tony Pollard, not just for this season, but for moving forward with this team. Because if they see him as a part-time back, we're probably going to get a lot of what we saw of him with the Cowboys, which is still a pretty good back, but probably more of a late RB2 than where I had him as a higher RB2. So I've moved him down a little bit, but I think this is a perfect description of Tony Pollard, is a guy that absolutely can make or break your season this year. And it's tough to know, should you be trading for this guy or trading this guy away? I feel like if I'm rostering him right now, I'm probably holding and hoping the value inflates once we get to the season and he is that hot hand. Because I do think he is probably just a little bit better than Spears in terms of skill. We don't have the knee worry that we do with Spears as well. So I think I like Tony Pollard, but he is firmly on the fence.
Fitz, do you have a cheaper alternative in mind? It would be funny if it was Tyjae Spears, but
No, it's another guy in an ambiguous backfield, though. It's Jaleel McLaughlin, the Broncos. And I'm interested in McLaughlin because I think there's going to be a pass catching bonanza for one or more of the Denver running backs this year. And that's always the case with Sean Payton offenses. The Broncos led the league in running back targets last year with 153. There was only one other team that had more than 130 running back targets. And that was always the case with the Saints throughout the entirety of Sean Payton's tenure there. The Saints were always among the leaders in running back targets. And, oh, by the way, Bo Nix is a check down machine. So, I think McLaughlin has like 60, 70 catch upside. And it's probably not just going to be him. It's probably also going to be Javonte Williams or Samaje Perine. But there are going to be a lot of receptions there. And I kind of like Jaleel McLaughlin as a much cheaper alternative than Tony Pollard in Dynasty.
What's a fair trade there, Fitz? Like, would it be Jaleel and would it have to be a first? Jaleel and a second?
No. I mean, like I'm not even giving up a first for Pollard straight up.
I'm not. I'm saying you're trading away Pollard. So you're trading away Pollard. You're gonna want Jaleel plus something because, as you said, Jaleel is looked at as way lesser than Pollard right now. So if we're talking about like market value, it would
I'd
be
ask
Jaleel and what?
I'd ask for a second, but I'd take a third.
Okay, I think I would ask for a second, and I don't think I'd come off a second. I think it would have to be a second if I'm selling Pollard because Pollard still does have. Maybe I believe in Pollard a little bit more than you.
You
I
do.
think he still has a little bit more upside. So
I definitely would lean closer to Bogman there. Just as I said before, I'm above consensus on Pollard. Bogman, who's your first running back here?
my first is going to be Jaylen Warren, and this is the running backs I've picked. I'm down on the wide receivers that I've picked. I'm high on, so I kind of want to get your take. Am I too high on these guys, or not? And Jaylen is a guy that I'm lower on than consensus. His ECR right now is 29. I have him at 33. I'm a little bit higher than him on the overall on both, one QB league and super flex. That is more for my thought process of just running backs overall being a little more valuable because I want to win now. Jaylen Warren, very high in receptions. I know our boy Erickson is excited about him catching the ball out of the backfield, and that is Russell Wilson's specialty. But if they go to Justin Fields, I don't know how well that's going to work under Justin Fields. And I think that move is going to be pretty quick. Jaylen Warren is great with the ball in his hands as well. So I think they're going to run the ball a bunch. I think this offense is built around Najee and Jaylen, but he is the epitome of a boomer bust player, I feel like. And I'm firmly riding the fence on him. I have him lower in the running back rankings, but higher in the overall. So, Fitz, break my tie here. Which way do you see Jaylen Warren going?
I mean, any running back in an Arthur Smith offense is a make or break by definition. So I guess ultimately I'm in because I do think that Arthur Smith is probably going to want to run this offense through the running backs. And I do believe in Jaylen Warren's talent. Like I think he might very well be more talented than Najee Harris and more explosive. I don't think there's any question about that.
There's not. He is definitely more explosive, 100%.
Yeah. So I'm in.
I find myself, we've talked a lot about how one of kind of the key questions of this season is going to be the Texans receiving core. I think it is not getting talked about enough that if you kind of get the Steelers backfield right, like if there is a main guy in this backfield, because that's just the way Arthur Smith decides to run with it, that could be a very important answer to get right for this season. And, these guys are young enough that for the next couple of years that applies. So I'm really curious to see how he operates this backfield and if somebody does emerge in terms of the fantasy perspective, or if he kind of splits things up and we see one of these guys as the clearly superior runner and then he just goes with the other like we saw in Atlanta a year ago. So I'm really fascinated to see what happens with Jaylen Warren this season, honestly. Fitz, let's go to your next running back.
All right, it's Zack Moss. And right now he is in a tooth and nail battle for playing time with the Bengals with Chase Brown. And realistically, both guys are going to play. But Chase Brown seems to be getting more first team reps early in Bengals camp. Moss is surprisingly expensive in both redraft and dynasty. Like he is, people are really, I think, conflating that great 4-game stretch he had early last season when Jonathan Taylor was on IR. And then in the first game when Taylor was off IR and the Colts used him very lightly. Over those 4 games, Moss had like 500 and some yards from scrimmage and 4 touchdowns. But man, 2.5 seasons in Buffalo didn't really do much. From week 6 on, Moss averaged 3.7 yards per carry. You could make the contention that maybe he benefited in those first 4 games from playing a lot of them, not all because Anthony Richardson missed some time, but he played some of those 4 games with Anthony Richardson, whose mobility may very well spike the efficiency of the running backs with whom he is playing. So I still have issues with Zack Moss's talent. I don't know if he's a guy you should be coveting in Dynasty, and I don't know how much he's going to help you in 2025. I will say, though, like if someone can take this job and run with it for the Bengals, like being the lead back in an offense that has Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, you're not going to be running against a lot of stacked boxes with that aerial threat. So, and I'll go ahead, Worm, and mention my cheaper alternative. It's Devin Singletary, the guy who, oh, by the way, outsnapped and outtouched Zack Moss in all of their 2.5 seasons together in Buffalo. Like Singletary basically outplayed Zack Moss there every year. And Singletary has a completely unfettered path to RB1 status with the Giants. And yet Zack Moss is routinely ranked ahead of Devin Singletary in Dynasty and has like, higher trade values and all the Dynasty trade calculators. I think Singletary is the more valuable guy, and he's cheaper.
What do you think, Bogman?
I mean, all of that, and you didn't even mention Zack Moss's extensive injury history, right? And the arm issue that he had last season. I am just all the way off of the Zack Moss hype train. I do agree with you. He belongs on this list because when you look at this, part of a high-flying offense like the Bengals, if Joe Burrow is going to stay healthy, right, is that there's so much opportunity here. Joe Mixon is gone. Joe Mixon has been the key to this offense at the running back position for a long time. So now him and, and another inexperienced back in Chase Brown are fighting for this. I believe in Chase Brown, and so do you, way more than Zack Moss. And it seems like he's already ahead in the training camp competition as well. Zack Moss is a very good complimentary back. I think that's where he stays. So I'm just not interested at all. I would have all those other names that you mentioned in terms of ECR. Kendry Miller is right in his range. Chase Brown is right ahead of him. But other guys like, Jalen Wright is behind him. I'd rather have him. I'd rather have Ray Davis. I'd rather take a shot on Raheem Mostert's upside just for this season after he's, scored 20 touchdowns last year. So there are plenty of backs that I would rather have than take the risk on Zack Moss. He's not bad if he falls, but he's too expensive for what he is, I feel like, right now.
Boggs, let's stick with you for the last running back here.
DeAndre Swift. And I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but this is kind of one of the ultimate ones. And one of the guys that I am just so much lower on than ECR. Right now, his ECR is 17 among running backs. He had a great year with Philly last year, but I attribute most of his good year to the Eagles' offensive line. So when I'm looking at the players among him in ECR, Joe Mixon's behind him, Stevenson's behind him, even Derrick Henry and David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Alvin Kamara, Tyjae Spears, all of these guys, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris, Zamir White, who are in a different tier. I'd rather have all of those guys than DeAndre Swift. This offense could open up and perform really well. And maybe he's a beneficiary of Caleb Williams coming in, the aerial attack being great. Maybe all the stuff that we're thinking about with, the running back situation in Cincinnati is the same in Chicago because the offense is so good. Even if it is, I don't think DeAndre Swift is the type of guy to carry a massive workload, especially not with Roshan behind him for short yardage stuff. And I don't think he's that much better than Khalil Herbert, who is still on this team. So I just have no interest in DeAndre Swift. All of those other guys I'd be trading him for. And, even those guys in the lower range, if I could get, Brian Robinson and a pick because of the way DeAndre Swift is viewed, I'm doing it. I just have no interest in drafting DeAndre Swift or trading for him. And if I have a team where I am rostering DeAndre Swift, I'm taking advantage of this perception that of him coming off of this Philly year last year. I'm not doing it.
Do you guys know the meme that's like the sign at a car dealership and it just says 0% interest? Like that that picture is me with DeAndre Swift. I'm totally with you, Bogman. By the way, I'm sure Fitz needs to be explained what a meme actually is. I'm totally with you on Swift. Like I have 0% interest at his current cost. I think a lot of the value, I mean, all the points you just said, like about the value he had in Philly, what the situation is in Chicago. There's a world where I get burned by this stance, but I'm comfortable going into this season, not wanting him on any kind of my rosters, given what the cost is. Fitz, where do you stand on Swift this year?
Oh, he's just such a vexing player. And I'm sure you guys remember when the Lions were featured on Hard Knocks a couple of years ago, like they would show the meeting rooms. And I think it was Deuce Staley, who was the Lions running back coach at the time, would be talking about how talented DeAndre Swift was, but like he'd, get upset that Swift ran out of bounds on a play where he should have like turned it upfield and lowered his shoulder. And then eventually the Lions just kind of kicked him to the curb. Started his tenure with the Eagles so well with a couple of 100-yard rushing games right out of the chute, and then ran out of gas a little bit, it seemed like. And then the Eagles just had no interest in bringing him back. I mean, one thing that does make me think twice about just dismissing him is that like the Bears announced the signing of him like 1 minute into the free agency period. Like Ryan Poles had zeroed in on DeAndre Swift clearly as like the guy he wanted for his backfield in what should be an ascendant offense in Chicago. So
Ryan Poles has never made a mistake.
the Chase Claypool trade was not his shining moment, but like I generally think Poles has done a pretty good job with the Bears, and this is coming from a Green Bay Packers fan. So yeah, I mean, basically I agree with you guys, but I'm still maybe not ready to just totally walk away from him. I don't think I have him on any of my dynasty rosters, but like under the right circumstances, I could maybe see acquiring him inexpensively if I could. So I am curious about Bug's less expensive alternative to DeAndre Swift.
Anybody. I mean, honestly, like I don't want him where he's valued. So I'm taking all those guys I said before, like, even Javonte, who's in a weird situation. If I could get Javonte in a higher pick for him, I'm doing it. Brian Robinson, I want over him. I see Brian Robinson as a complete back. Even Jaylen Warren, who I'm low on, I'd rather have Jaylen Warren than DeAndre Swift. I just think he's a better player. I think the lowest I would go in a trade, and I'd have to get a pick back, Zach Charbonnet. I think Zach Charbonnet is built to be a 3-down back. Unfortunately, right now he has Ken Walker in front of him, but we're talking about dynasty. We're talking about long-term future. When he leaves Seattle, or if anything happens to Ken Walker, you got a guy with not a ton of miles on him, a lot of tread. He's a big kid. He's in a tough situation for fantasy, but he's still a very good running back. I just don't like DeAndre Swift. So if I'm rostering him, I'm looking to deal him.
Yeah, all those dudes you mentioned, Boggs, like there's no way I'm giving you a pick back with any of them. Like maybe a 5th rounder or something for
right. But right now in ECR, Brian Robinson is 28 and DeAndre Swift is 17. So I know you
crazy.
won't. Perception, though, says that I get a pick back. So I'll use that for sure.
By the way, Bogman, you mentioned like the tread on the tires. That it was very recently, and this says something about my knowledge of cars, but it was very recently that I realized like having more tread means having used the tire less, like, and less tread is like that they had. Like I would always think, like, oh, a lot of tread on those tires, like, oh, they've been used a lot, and I just don't know cars well enough, and I was wrong about that. So that's. I put all of my effort into sports, not cars, as a stereotypical interest growing up. Before we get to the wide receivers, I do want to tell everybody about Draft Intel, the secret weapon you need to dominate your league. You can get it for free by syncing your league today at fantasypros.com/intel. It provides a deep dive into your league mates' drafting history, showing their patterns, tendencies, draft strategies, and more. You want to know who always drafts rookies too early or who reaches for homer picks? Draft Intel will tell you. Best of all, if you're a premium member, you can even mock draft against your league's intel. Make Draft Intel your secret weapon and begin dominating your league today at fantasypros.com/intel. I actually didn't even realize that was free to get the intel, without the mock draft side of it. That's awesome. I think that's one of the single best tools on the entire Fantasy Pros site. So I hope everybody syncs their league and tries that out. Let's get to the wide receivers here. Fitz, we'll start with you. Who is a wide receiver that is a make or break player this season?
Brandon Aiyuk, who everyone is really excited about, and he is a terrific player. But for me, there are some red flags here, and one is that among receivers with at least 50 targets last year, Aiyuk ranked number 1 in yards per target, number 2 in yards per catch, and number 6 in yards per route run. Really good. So it's reasonable to expect that above average to, near great efficiency. But I think it was so great and just hyper good last year that I don't think it's repeatable. And he's in a target squeeze because he has to share with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, and he's unhappy. He has expressed the desire to get out of San Francisco because he knows he's not going to get the targets befitting his talent. So those are red flags to me. And I just wonder if he is going to give us the sort of season we're hoping for from a guy that people consider like, one of the top assets on their dynasty teams, a guy people are spending like second or third round picks for in redraft. I'm worried about him. And like my cheaper alternative to Brandon Aiyuk is DK Metcalf, who, like Brandon Aiyuk, is 26 years old. Metcalf's yearly finishes in PPR fantasy scoring over the last 4 years: wide receiver 7, wide receiver 14, wide receiver 16, wide receiver 21. Pretty consistent. He's averaged 1,066 yards and 8.6 touchdowns this season over that span, and he has missed one game in 5 NFL seasons. I mean, look at DK Metcalf. The dude is indestructible. And, Metcalf, I believe, is signed for 2 more years in Seattle. He's still the alpha receiver. Even if we get a breakout season from JSN, I would expect DK Metcalf to lead the Seahawks in yardage this year. So, I'm just a little bit nervous about Brandon Aiyuk for all of those reasons.
Yeah, with Aiyuk, like I get that situations matter, but situations also change and talent doesn't go away, barring, when he starts to get older and injured and stuff. Like, and I just love the talent of Aiyuk so much that thinking long term, I just want him on the roster because I am forcing myself to believe that the situation will be better in terms of what we see from the volume stuff. And by the way, parts of the situation are quite good. He's in a very high scoring offense. Having said that, for this season, you've been kind of banging this drum for a while, Fitz, this offseason about you think he's overranked for 2024 and for the short term in general with what the 49ers situation is. So I do get it. Bogman, I'm curious where you come down on Aiyuk.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty status quo on where Aiyuk is. I think I'm one spot ahead of ECR, so I'm not like in love. I'm also not hating at all on Aiyuk, but also I have him 2 spots away from DK Metcalf, and they're separated by more than that in ECR. I believe it's 13 and 19 or 12 and 19, something like that for Aiyuk and DK Metcalf. So for me, I still like Aiyuk, and he's a really good route runner. And as Wormeli mentioned, if his situation changes, he could be an easy number one and just get peppered with an insane amount of targets from a team that really needs him. If the extension goes there, then I don't really think they can afford him and Deebo. So I think maybe Deebo is out. Kittle's career isn't, going to last much longer either. And I would like to see him stay in San Francisco with Brock Purdy when these guys are gone, right? Because it is going to be, shorter for those guys. I feel like in San Francisco, Debo's not going to retire, but I think Kittle could be gone soon. Christian McCaffrey, who knows when the knife is going to fall? It could be this year and it could be in 5 years. There's no telling with CMC. So I really like the skill. I'm going to bank on that. So I'm kind of status quo with Brandon Aiyuk. I'm not really dealing him right
Just to be clear, I think he's an awesome player. I mean, like
Mhm.
all around receiver, route
Just
running,
overvalued,
after
you
the
seem, right?
catch. Yeah, I mean, like the guy's even a great blocker, but I am worried about the 2024 outlook with the target squeeze, the, general unhappiness. And like the nice thing about him, you would not be selling low on him. Like there is great
Yeah.
interest in Brandon Aiyuk right now.
And there are players that, Devin Achan, there's just no way he matches last year's efficiency rating, right?
Right.
Same thing with IU. Doesn't mean that we dislike these guys as players. It just might mean they're overrated in terms of value right now.
You're
What would you
telling
be
me
asked?
Achane is not gonna average 7.8 yards a carry this year, Boggs? Are you
I'm not
serious?
going to say it's impossible because he did it last year, but I'll say it's not likely. How about that?
Before we move on from Aiyuk, Fitz, what would you be looking for? Like if you were trying to trade him for Metcalf, what would you want paired with Metcalf to move off Aiyuk?
Oh, man. Yeah, it wouldn't take a lot. Maybe another thing where I would want a third, maybe. Metcalf plus a third.
Even maybe a fourth if you have Metcalf slightly higher, just a small kicker
Yeah.
because of perceived value. Yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Bogman, who is your first wide receiver here?
All right. Let's start the hate from Wormeli here. It's Zay Flowers. And I'm actually lower on him. I said I was higher on the wide receivers. I'm higher on the next two guys. But this guy I'm lower on a little bit. Zay Flowers, I do think in terms of skill, he's really good. 108 targets last season, 858 yards. Missed a game, was kind of banged up in a couple other ones. But also, we talked about this before. Mark Andrews missed a big chunk of time. They don't really have another guy in this offense that is demanding targets. So I think in a run first team with one of the best running quarterbacks in NFL history, and now one of the best running backs in recent NFL history in Derrick Henry, I just think the production is going to be a little more calm. I'd rather have Zay Flowers as a wide receiver 3. Right now, he's firmly as a wide receiver 2, sometimes on the wide receiver 1 borderline for some people. I do think there are camps. I'm in the camp of what Fitz just said. Like, I really like this player. I really don't like his situation. And I think he's overvalued right now. So if I could flip Zay and the guys that are around him, because his ECR right now is 21. If I could get T. Higgins, I think I would do that. If I could get Jordan Addison, if I could get Pickens and a kicker, Rashee Rice with the suspension and something else, and like Keon Coleman is down here in the 40s. We all know that I'm a Keon Coleman stan. So is Fitzy. If I could do that, I think those are all moves that I'd be willing to make to come off of Zay Flowers. Again, love the player. Don't really like the situation that he's in.
Given some of the past episodes we've had, when you said Pickens and a kicker, I thought you were for a second actually saying a kicker.
Whatever, Wormeli. No kickers. Not actual.
That's where my brain went at first.
No. And a draft pick is what I should say. Something on top, a kicker, an adder, an appetizer, however you want to say it, not a place kicker. No.
I get a lot of comments about like being a Ravens homer. I'm not gonna do that here. I'm not. I don't see him as a sell. I see him as like a hold, right? Of like buy, hold, or sell. I'm not really. I think the situation's better than you're describing. I think that like because a lot of people are kind of giving up on Rashad Bateman. I'm not really personally doing that, but like if those people are right, then there's really nobody in that receiver room. There are the tight ends, which are nice, and we know that it's a team that's going to run the ball, but somebody in that receiver room is going to catch passes, and I think it's going to be Zay Flowers, like by a significant amount over anybody else. And even if Bateman is what I think he can be, and I am buying the dip on Bateman, that's still only 2 guys in that receiver room. So I don't think it's as crowded as you're making it out to be.
It might not be, but I'll say like if Mark Andrews is healthy the whole year, and let's say one of those guys steps up, I don't think it's going to be Bateman, whoever it is, and maybe it's halfway through the season they get a step up from somebody. Maybe they trade for somebody. I don't know what the scenario is, but like you said, if there's another guy, I think the numbers that Zay put up last year, if you put them up again, most people will be disappointed with those numbers. And I'm saying that's what I want. I expect what he did last year, which was pretty solid. Wide receiver 2-3 borderline is fine. I see him more firmly as a 3.
It's almost a situation where I think his ECR is almost not even in line with perceived value, because I think you're right. Like I think a back end wide receiver 2 is a very reasonable and I think correct ranking for him in Dynasty. But I think the perceived value might be that there is a big leap coming in year 2 where he rises above that, and that's where you can take advantage of it in a trade. Fitz, I'm curious where you come down on Flowers.
Yeah, in fairness, I don't know if he makes that big leap in year 2, Worm, just because I think the Ravens are probably going to be top 3 in run rates this year. And as Bogman mentioned, Andrews is coming back, and you're going to see some receptions by Bateman and maybe Tez Walker, and so it is hard to see like 130 target upside for Zay Flowers. I like the player. I just don't know if he's going to get what we're hoping for statistically in 2024. And that's kind of the point of the show, make or break for 2024. Yeah, I don't see him being the sort of player who makes your team this year. I don't think we get like some massive Zay Flowers breakout this year.
Fitz, just real quick, the rookies versus Zay Flowers. Are you going Zay or Keon Coleman?
I do think I've got Zay ranked a little higher. I've got like Zay
Okay.
ranked ahead of Keon and Lad. Not by
That's what I
much.
was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you could get I keep wanting to say kicker, but I know that's confusing me. A second, a third. So Lad and a third for Zay. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
fair?
I mean, yeah, I'd take that in a heartbeat. Like the gap is not that big. So I
Okay.
mean, it would be. I mean, I'd take like a 2026 third probably to
Okay.
close that gap.
Any little thing added
Yep.
on top, you would do
Yeah.
it. I see. Okay.
I would do that for Lad. I don't think I would do that for Keon, but I know you guys are both higher on Keon. That's just where I stand on it. All right, Fitz, who's your next wide receiver?
It is Stefon Diggs, and I feel like this is kind of low-hanging fruit because everyone realizes this is sort of a crossroad year for Diggs, who averaged 111 catches, 1,343 yards, and 9.3 touchdowns during his 4 years in Buffalo. But obviously, things were kind of going south for him late last year over his last 10 games, playoffs included. Diggs had 1 touchdown, averaged 42.4 yards per game, 42.2 yards per game, and 5.3 yards per targets. Pretty bad numbers. And now he's got to share targets with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. And maybe it's a squeaky wheel thing this year in Houston where like Diggs kind of demands that he is the number one guy and CJ Stroud kind of tries to use him that way. But it's easy to see this not going well with him not getting the targets he thinks he deserves and maybe complaining about it. Steph Diggs has been a little bit of a diva in the past and will not hesitate
Not
to
a wide
express
receiver.
himself if he doesn't feel he's getting the ball. Yeah, imagine that. So yeah, I don't know. He's not the easiest guy to involve in trades either, because the people who are holding him sort of want the name brand Steph Diggs return for him. And other people are like, yeah, I don't know if he's still the Steph Diggs we know and love. So kind of a hard guy to deal for. But, like the cheaper alternative, I think, is Diontae Johnson, who I think is positioned to be an alpha receiver for the Panthers this year. I mean, Diontae has already averaged 9 targets and 5.4 catches a game over the last 4 years. And like, I don't see anyone else um, contesting his status as the number one receiver in a Panthers offense. It should be a lot better, hopefully, with Dave Canales running the show. Canales obviously worked wonders for Baker Mayfield. Maybe he can do the same for Bryce Young. But even though Bryce Young was pretty terrible as a rookie, 11 weeks into the season, Adam Thielen was wide receiver 10 in PPR scoring and was averaging 7.6 catches a game. So like that is the sort of upside we're talking about for Diontae Johnson. In some ways I'd almost rather have Diontae than Diggs straight up, especially since Diontae is younger. But I know that most people have Diggs ranked higher in Dynasty, and I don't know if you made that trade, maybe you could get a little juice along with Diontae. I don't know what would bridge that gap for you guys.
It'd probably be a third. I think a third round pick or a handcuff running back that I need, like a Blake Corum if I'm rostering Kyron Williams, something like that. If you could work out something like that, like a smaller piece, um, you know, would probably get that done for me. If I'm trading Diggs to get Diontae Johnson and something, that would probably be
But by the
around
way,
the
just
cost for me.
like as an aside, like a third round pick in rookie drafts is like the perfect for any trade. Just like, yeah, I'll throw in a third, or hey, you could throw in a
But you
third
never
too.
ask for a third. You
Like
ask for a first. You let
exactly,
them be
you settle
offended.
for the third, but
You
it's like
said then you go, all right, fine. I'll
because
take
nobody
your
wants to
stupid
trade
third.
first, and second, it like really kind of depends. If you're a contender, you're probably willing to. If you're a rebuilder, you're probably not. So it's kind of black and white in that sense. A third is the perfect, like people are almost always willing to move it, and it's good enough. It's not like, oh, it's like a 2027 fifth, but it's like, Yeah, third round. Okay, like that's it's just the perfect trade piece, and
I am constantly missing my third round pick. So
yeah. Then you get to the rookie
you're
draft, and
right.
you're like, boy, I sure wish I had more thirds. But
Yeah, yeah. Let me trade for a third now that I don't have any. Right. Yeah. I think it's fair. And I think Diggs is the perfect player to put in this scenario too of make or break, because we're used to 150 targets and 1,300 yards and a handful of touchdowns at least. Like, he's been so productive, but he is a falling knife player. I have him in the same range of some young guys like we talked about in tiers earlier this season. Like, I like to give you some young options and some closer to win now options that are going to, like, I expect Mike Evans and Stefon Diggs to outproduce Worthy and Brian Thomas and McConkey and guys like that this season. But I also wouldn't be shocked if Keon Coleman outproduced Stefon Diggs. The situation is great for Coleman where it's not for Diggs. So yeah, this is a perfect player to put in an episode like this. I think it really depends on what your status is for your team heading into the season. If you think you can win and a guy like Diggs is going to put you over, trade for him. If your team is looking not so good, trade him away. It's pretty simple analysis, but also maybe wait into the season. Let him have a couple big games to start week 1 or week 2, and then let people get back on the Stefon Diggs hype train and then trade him. You could be stuck at sea without without an engine if you wait a month and he just sucks and Tank Dell and Nico are out producing him. But that's I'm willing to take that risk sometimes to get the value I think I should get for a guy like Stefon Diggs.
who's your next receiver, Bogman?
I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin here. And I'm all Pollyanna on Terry McLaurin, right? Like, I think this is the season that he is going to boom. I think a Cliff Kingsbury offense where you're the clear number 1 wide receiver is just such a good situation to be in. I think we forget that this guy is pushing 30. He's 29 right now. He's 28. He'll be 29 a week into the season. So, born in 95. So he's getting up there in age. We have a nice perceived value from Cliff Kingsbury and this offense. There's not a lot of competition for targets. Jahan Dotson has not proven anything. Zach Ertz is old. Sanat is a, rookie. So I really like him for this year. I don't see the downside. So to me, I'm kind of asking you guys, is there downside to Terry McLaurin? Is it the age? Is that the thing that we should poke the hole in? Because I am really excited about Terry McLaurin this year. Are you with me, Fitz? Or are you, he's a little bit older. We're not sure about this offense. We're not sure about Jaden Daniels. I'm tending to stiff arm those, and maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to someone on our Discord last night they're in full rebuilding mode and they're carrying around Terry McLaurin. And, he's like, I should probably trade Terry McLaurin. And there was some other veteran player. And I'm like, yeah, you got to shop those guys. Like, Terry McLaurin should be on a contending team, but I do like him. I mean, is there downside? I don't know that there is. I mean, the dude's had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, at least 77 catches in all of those seasons. And like, the quarterbacks he's played with is such a laundry list of mediocrity. It's ridiculous. Kyle Allen, Sam Howell, Dwayne Haskins, Carson Wentz, late career Alex Smith. I mean, like, he has literally not played with a single good quarterback, and now he gets the number 2 pick in the draft and the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. So I'm absolutely excited about him. And that's the thing. I mean, like, if you're a contender and you want him, you're not going to get him cheaply. You shouldn't be able to get him cheaply. You're not getting a first round pick for him in a super flex draft, probably. But
Yeah, I don't think so either.
you're also probably not settling for just a second rounder for Terry McLaurin if you're a rebuilding team trying to sell him off. So it's probably going to take a second and some sort of young
if you're trading him for a risk. That, I think that's the thing that I don't like, is that he's such a guarantee. And if you do trade him, it's a risk. It's either a second round pick or it's a third and Xavier Legette or Troy Franklin or, somebody kind of down the list that is not a guarantee at all. And Terry McLaurin seems like a lock for 1,000 yards and 70 catches. Touchdowns are question marks. But I think that is a bad season in this offense for Terry McLaurin is 70 catches and 1,000 yards. So I see a lot of upside. So he's a guy that I think could make your season. So I want to trade for him right now. If I can trade something along the lines of that, if I can flip out Franklin in a third or Franklin in 2/3 or whatever it is, Franklin in a kicker, a running back, not a actual kicker, an add-on. So something like that. I think that's the trade. I would rather be trading for him than trading him away. But he's a little bit older. So thank you, Fitz, for reaffirming my love for Terry McLaurin. He should rocket up all boards.
I really got in your head with that kicker comment.
You did a little bit. You did. Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a different word. I'm so used to saying kicker and my cliches of meat on the bone and stuff.
I think people know what you're talking about. It
was
was just funny because you listed kickers as one of your favorite picks in a startup draft on a recent episode, and we gave you a hard time about it. And B, it was just where my mind went. But I think you can say it. People know what you mean. Quick note on Reality Sports Online. By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, one more wide receiver each here. Fitz, let's go to yours.
Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is 31 and he's missed 13 games over the last 2 seasons. And I think we have to acknowledge that his ceiling has been lowered by the emergence of Puka Nacua, but he's still Cooper Kupp. Like if he can stay healthy in 2024, he's going to get the ball. Maybe not, have a 100 and whatever it was, 45 catch season a few years ago, but he's still going to be like a prolific producer. Like wide receiver 2, I think if he stays healthy all year, somewhere in that range. But man, like he's risky. That's the thing. He's an older, risky wide receiver, another guy you should not have on your team if you're rebuilding, and you should probably be pursuing if you're a contender. But at the same time, if you have him on your roster and he's a contender, like he could have injury issues again. And, for that reason, I would want to acquire him, but wouldn't want to give up all that much for him.
Where do you come down on Kupp right now, Bogman?
I'm higher on Kupp. You guys know I'm more of a win now guy, but I'm looking at ECR fits and he's one spot below Terry McLaurin. What do you think of that situation? Because I mean, we like Terry McLaurin. We're Pollyanna on him here. We're all excited about him. But I think if I could get Cooper Kupp for Terry McLaurin, especially if my team is already pretty good, I think I might pull the trigger on that.
Nah, I'd rather McLaurin.
Okay. I think, that we're seeing the difference in philosophy here.
I think Kupp might be the prime example on today's episode of make or break. Like I could
sure.
You could totally see if he has a fully healthy season this year, like even if Puka is still good, but if Puka takes a little bit of a step back, which is very reasonable to think could happen, and Kupp is his usual healthy self, the connection he has with Stafford, there's not really that many other options in the he's not gonna be 2021 Cooper Kupp again, but he could be a very, very good, like potentially like a league winning type of guy, honestly. And also if the injuries continue to pile up and if Puka is just like that dude, you could see him not being a value. I think it could really go either way. The degree to which you're relying on Cooper Kupp could be really significant for what your season looks like.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yes.
And my cheaper alternative, and he's really not that much cheaper. Like, I don't think you're getting any juice if you had a trade involving these two players, is Amari Cooper. And because Cooper's a little bit younger, he's more durable. Cooper had 78 catches, 1,160 yards, and 9 touchdowns in his first season with the Browns. 72 catches, 1,250 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. So pretty consistent. He's averaged like 14.8 fantasy point. I believe that's PPR, 14.8 fantasy points a game since joining the Browns. And Amari Cooper is really the only Browns pass catcher who clicked with Deshaun Watson last year. In the 5 games that Watson started and finished last year, Cooper had 90 or more receiving yards in 4 of them, all but 1. So like he might be the one quarterback proof guy on that team. And I think he's a little more reliable than Cooper Kupp.
I think that's a great call. I think if you're a contending team in Dynasty, Amari Cooper is one of my favorite affordable buys. If you're that type of manager, I think that's a really good call. Bogman, let's go to a guy on the other end of the age spectrum who's a rookie.
All right, I need everyone's help here, right? So when you see this show, you're gonna see people call me an idiot and a moron.
I did do a double take when you sent this name in, by the way.
And
so it's
listen,
like other shows, unlike other shows. How? Bugs?
Yeah. Thank you, Fitz, for that. Rome, I'm going to say Rome Odunze. This is not because I want to trade Rome Odunze. I'm doing this for the exercise of knowing when the hype train is enormous on players. This just so happens to be a hype train player that is below Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison, so he's third. But for his skill, I love him. I have him as my 16th overall player in Dynasty. His ECR is 27. So I am much higher on Rome Odunze than most people. And I think for the Dynasty perspective, it's going to be best to trade for him after the season starts. And let's say DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are the 2 guys rocking for the first month. Rome Odunze maybe has 1 or 2 good games in there. The others are kind of subpar. And he's really third in the pecking order. Maybe even DeAndre Swift had a good game in there. I doubt it. But maybe. So I think for perception right now, Rome Odunze is either really low or really high, depending on who you ask. So for me, I'm trying to trade for Rome Odunze, but you might have a psycho like me that loves him, sees him as a firm first, second round borderline type of player in the future, and maybe you can get too much for him right now, because before some of these guys have played, the hype train is insane on them. And Marvin Harrison Jr., the hype train is insane. He's already a first round pick, right? So it's not for the player specifically to trade him away. I want to trade for him. But if you don't feel the way I do about Rome and you don't like him in this offense with Keenan Allen, with DJ Moore, who they just extended, he's going to be there for a while. Maybe a lot of people think Caleb Williams is overrated, right? So if these are little nitpicks for you, you're not going to get a higher value of Rome Odunze early in the season, maybe late in the season. If Keenan Allen gets hurt, then he can break out. But I do think that there is a possibility that Rome Odunze is the best wide receiver on this team today. Not in a couple years, not in the middle of the season. There is a possibility he's the best wide receiver on this team today with really good wide receivers in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. So this is more for the exercise of what we're talking about, make or break players, because I think Rome could be one of those guys for you this season, and his value is going to be very high. I'm not trading him personally, but I know some people don't like this Bears offense. They don't like the fact that he's in a share with these other 2 guys, and you can trade him away to people that are super hyped on him like I am right now.
You could not pry Rome Odunze from my cold, dead hands.
Same. If I've drafted him, me either.
Can I give you a scenario, Worm, where you might be put to the test? Okay. Let's say Rome is behind DJ Moore and Keenan Allen this year, and he's putting up the sort of numbers that like Jackson Smith and Jigba put up last year, where he's not real fantasy relevant. Your team's off to a 6-0 start, your super flex team, and you lose one of your starting quarterbacks. Like you are built to win a title, but now you have got a flat tire, and you've got Rome parked there on your bench, and there is a rebuilding team that has, like say it's Trevor Lawrence or something, and he is willing to deal you Trevor Lawrence, but he is asking for Rome Odunze as part of the return package to get you back on the road after blowing your tire. So then are you considering it?
How much tread is on that tire, Fitz?
Yeah, we need to get discount tire on the case of what tread means. Um, you said in a super flex, right?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. I would, in that scenario you described, be willing to. Now, part of that is that I like Lawrence, and I like that you're still getting a guy with upside as well. If you were talking about, like, let's say like a Matthew Stafford, where it's like, okay, like he could still be good this year. There's
Yeah.
not really the long term of. That's where I like. I think the correct answer is probably yes in the scenario you described. I would personally have a lot more trouble doing that for somebody like Stafford. For somebody like Lawrence, though, I would say yes. Like, that's a scenario where I'm willing to move him. But it would have to be a scenario like that. And by the way, like, I kind of agree with Bogman that, like, I think the possibility of Rome being maybe not wide receiver one, they did just pay DJ Moore, but like one of the top two guys ahead of one of Keenan Allen or DJ Moore. I think, Keenan Allen, the more likely, person. I think that's very much on the table, and I think it's being undervalued in redraft. If it doesn't happen, though, I'm going to be very aggressively trying to trade for Rome
Yes.
at the end of the season. If he does it, maybe not like the extreme of a JSN season, but if he is the clear third in the pecking order for most of this year, if not all of this year, come January, I'm going to be sending a lot of trade offers for Rome, being very excited about the future.
And for the record, I'm not trading Rome unless I get one of those young players with upside, and like it'd be like Lad and a first. It wouldn't be. I'm not selling him cheap at all in any scenario whatsoever. So, and I think I'm with Worm in your statement. You could take him out of my cold dead hands. Fitz eloquently put together a scenario to immediately backtrack off of that, and I'm with you. I'd have to take the quarterback in that scenario too, because when there's money on the table, go get the money. That's why I like to win now. So, but yeah, I mean, Fitz, is there any other scenario other than that where you would trade Rome this year?
I'd have to be getting like, young talent, an equal amount of young talent back. But,
Yeah, none of us have that thought process
Maybe like
of
if
the
you're a
Bears.
win now team, you trade Rome for like Tyreek, and you say like, listen, I'm very much win now. By year 2, it might look bad in
Sure.
hindsight, but
Yeah.
something like that I could see
I mean,
being.
I've got right now on my dynasty rankings, I do have Rome ranked ahead of Tyreek.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's not surprising to have him ranked, and none of us have that thought process of, Caleb Williams is overrated, and, Keenan Allen maybe has more years than we think, and DJ Moore playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with. All the stuff you said about Terry McLaurin, you could pretty much say about DJ Moore as well. He hasn't played with great quarterbacks either. So, yeah, I mean, we don't have that mindset, though. We think Rome is probably the best wide receiver on this team by next season. So
But
I'm not trading him. It's just for the exercise of when to trade players to people like us that are psychos that think that they're great before they even see the field.
by the way, I live in the Chicago area, so like usually I like have the 10 o'clock news on because I'm an old man and I want to watch the weather, and I'll usually leave it on for the local sports.
Why we have to explain what memes are to
Yeah,
you.
exactly. But they're doing a Bears segment every night now during training camp, and there was like a Odunze highlight on the local news pretty much every night. Like he is looking like everything he's cracked up to be.
I'm starting to feel like in startup drafts, he should just like the second Neighbors gets taken, just Rome should be the next pick. Like I'm starting to get pretty close to that. When Bogman said he did this he included Rome as a player to potentially trade for the exercise. We know that means he did it for the clicks because people will not agree.
And I love being called stupid. It's my favorite. So,
all right, let's do just some quick thoughts on one quarterback each here. Fitz, which quarterback are you selecting here?
Kirk Cousins, because he's always been a much, much, much better fantasy quarterback than real life quarterback, where, in fantasy, you just want his point total and you don't need him to win a clutch prime time game. Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles, though. He's also going from an offense designed from proven architect Kevin O'Connell to one designed by the less proven Zach Robinson. And there's also really talented young quarterback waiting in the wings with Michael Penix. So, yeah, I mean, he's kind of a pivot player. Like I could see like it's not hard to imagine Michael Penix finishing out the year as the Falcons starter, either by injury or like Cousins just kind of is at the point of his career where he starts to lose it a little bit. But like you can still get, especially in super flex leagues, a pretty good price for him in trades. So, and I'll just throw out the cheaper alternative, and people are going, oh man, the reaction to this is not going to be, the scene in Animal House where the Deltas are watching the slideshow of the prospective pledges and the picture of Flounder comes up and everyone is throwing beer cans at the screen. It could be the same sort. I know Worm doesn't get that because it's a movie that was made a long time ago. He probably hasn't seen Animal House.
I have seen Animal House. I don't specifically remember the scene because I only saw it once. And yes, it came out in 1978. So 14 years before I was born, but I have seen it at least once.
So you guys are watching the slides and all of a sudden a picture of Derek Carr comes up and you're probably throwing your beer can at the screen. But like, even though Carr is never going to carry an NFL team to a Super Bowl, like he can be a perfectly serviceable QB2 in a super flex league. If you've got a good QB1, like giving you your 15 fantasy points a game and 230 passing yards and 1.5 touchdowns a game. He's always going to be there for you. And, he's missed 2 games over the last 6 years. So, I think he's kind of a discount Kirk Cousins. Like, I don't think Cousins is that much more valuable than him, even though like people want to talk about Kirk Cousins being a future Hall of Fame candidate and like ascribing all these things to him. But I don't know. I guess I'm lower on Kirk Cousins than a lot of people and think this could maybe be not a great season for Kirk Cousins.
I think that's a really reasonable stance. Bogman, who's your quarterback that you want to highlight here?
Yeah, mine is the quarterback I want to talk about is Brock Purdy. I mean, Brock Purdy is, he's just not. Erickson described it perfectly. He came on ITL. We talked about some numbers, but he said Brock Purdy is not a lift. And I think that might be true for Brock Purdy. His efficiency numbers were crazy, but we already talked about Aiyuk can't be as efficient as he was last year. I think that probably stands for Purdy as well. I don't think he's Jimmy G. I don't think he's an interception machine, but I do think he's like, Russell Wilson a little bit without the running, right? Like I just think that he's surrounded by talent. Himself, he's more talented than we gave him credit for coming in, right? For sure. I mean, he was the last pick in the draft. There were a lot of bad quarterbacks picked in front of him. He's way better than everybody thought. NFL, fantasy, everybody but Brock Purdy and Iowa State fans, right? So he's better than that, but is he good? I don't know if he's good. It doesn't matter right now because he's surrounded by talent. But I do think that if you trade Purdy now, you could probably get more than what he's worth. And you can be happy about it if they do lose some of these players in the next couple of years, or if they just decide flat out, if they don't win the Super Bowl again this year, are they going to start looking around again and saying, man, we just can't seem to get over the hump. The one spot that we're not great at is quarterback. Let's go out. And that immediately becomes just such a great spot for a quarterback too. So I don't know. I just think Brock Purdy, it's tough to trade quarterbacks, especially if you're in a 1 QB league. They just hold no value. So it's always in super flex that you're trading them. And if I could get another quarterback back, if I could get like Trevor Lawrence and I only have to add a little on top, I think I would do that. So, I mean, I'm in on Brock Purdy for redraft, but for long term, I'm just not. So I think that's kind of my stance on Purdy.
We started the show with a conversation on the Titans. While we were recording, there was a update that DeAndre Hopkins is going to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a strained knee. So wanted to mention that here. I mean, if that we're obviously early enough, or far away enough from the start of the season that could end up not being super significant. If it is significant, Calvin Ridley, I think, is somebody who could fit easily on this list, especially if you're, trying to decide if you want him as a win now team. If there's more room for, target volume there, and B, if he just catches some of the very near misses he had last year. So
Here's your chance, Treylon Burks.
yeah,
Get in there, buddy.
I
Let's
almost
go.
asked if this
Prove us
makes
all
Treylon
wrong.
Burks a buy, but I still think I couldn't go so far as to that. Whose value tanked faster, Treylon Burks or Quentin Johnston? I mean, as first round picks in rookie drafts that are now.
I was more
completely
disappointed by
unwanted.
Burks because I liked him more, but I think Johnston's plummeted faster.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably right. All right, we'll get out of there on that. Hopefully, you guys can take some trade advice here from this show for them dozen players who could make or break your season. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around for the full hour. For Bogman and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.